Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, in so many ways, they did get it absolutely right. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I am so delighted that you're returning back to view this program this week. And we are talking about false flags and raging bulls. The idea of this is that there is so much going on, and with the internet, YouTube, social media, all the various mechanisms of communication, the potentials for uh, false flags, and then seeing the raging bulls come out of all of that is kind of where we're sitting right now. The disheartening uh, area that we're in at the moment is that we don't understand how to function within our governmental system. And this is something that I kind of want to address and bring to the forefront today because I have been asked by people via different mechanisms of communication as to Tom, with everything going on, what is it that we need to do? What is it that how should we act? Um, how should we address all the various issues? In regards to the false flags, I want to start off with that I have there in the references at, yep, over my shoulder for those watching on Rumble, is that and if you get to YouTube, okay, there too, but primarily I'm putting everything on Rumble. And those that are listening to the podcast, for sure, the key that I want you to go look at, the tie point for this, is a post that I read through and listened to by Doug Wilson earlier in the week, talking about false flags. And I think in the end, I'm going to sum it up. I think it's important that you go and you read or listen to that. The link again is at samueladamsreturns.net for that. And in that, I would really like you to pay attention to what he has to say. But ultimately, what I want you to pay attention to is what he emphasizes over and over and over again is don't fall for it. Don't fall for the false flags. Okay? And we're going to talk about a little bit of definition of false flags here. And not only the false flags on a political side, but also something that has bothered me for decades, as many of you well know, and it's the false flag even within the church, within Christianity, that is causing so many problems that is out there right now. First and foremost, what I want to cover in this initial segment, segment one of the program, is clearly you need to understand your individual state constitutions and your Bill of Rights. People have been so consumed by the national events, the national politics, that they have forgotten that we are a constitutional republic, which means we are constituted with many individual states and republics. Now, not everybody's a republic, some people are commonwealths. It is critical in answering this debate on the national level. And here it is for all of you who have been asking. It is critical that you understand your individual state's constitution and Bill of Rights. And that means every person that is all the way down to in a political party at the precinct level. Okay. It's critical that then you operate within that context. You hold, especially, and this is a key element, especially bureaucrats accountable to your Constitution and your Bill of Rights. You see, they don't know. They have no clue of what your Constitution says, especially the career bureaucrats. And this is where you go after them. And I'm going to tell you right now and direct, I'm giving you the answers for everybody that's asked me over the last several weeks of what to do. The what to do is that citizens being responsible according to your Bill of Rights attend the meetings of the various bureaucratic entities as well as the political entities and exercise your right to redress, your First Amendment right at the national basis, but look into your state constitution. So, in this segment, I'm going to try and get to it a little bit, but mostly in the second segment, I'm going to get to the states surrounding Ohio and talk about the Bill of Rights. So, I'm going to talk specifically about the Ohio Bill of Rights, the Indiana Bill of Rights, the Kentucky Bill of Rights, the Pennsylvania Bill of Rights, and even the West Virginia Bill of Rights. I got to tell you, West Virginia, when you put your state constitution together, you guys kind of messed up because unfortunately, you gave in your state constitution, when you read Article 1 of your state constitution, you gave the federal government too much power over you. It's a sad, that's why you need to have very strong uh, representatives at the federal level, because even at the state level, based on what you have in your state constitution, is I would think pretty scary myself, considering everything else. But all of the other states, even Pennsylvania as a commonwealth, Kentucky, Indiana, you know what? You guys have very, very strong bills of rights in your constitutions. And we're going to cover over that. But let me take it this way on that little bit of a twist on the red flags. So the red flags, when we take and we look at it, there's articles that I have, posted at samueladamsreturns.net that kind of talk about the red flag stuff. And when I look at that, I want you to know that it gets to this whole point of what does it mean? So I think the most interesting one, believe it or not, is Columbia Journalism Review. As much as I don't like Columbia University, but it's called How the Term False Flag or Migrated to the Right. And it's a very interesting article on where it moved into these whole ideas of conspiracy theory and how it launched both on the far right or far left and moving into a blame game. So, what we have right now, as we've seen with January 6th, we've seen at different state levels, we've seen in Wisconsin, you're seeing it now with the whole arena of activity over voter integrity. I won't even call it the fraud aspect, but voter integrity in its essence. There's all sorts of false flags happening. The largest one right now that's even destructive within the context of the Christian churches is that around the Chi-Com flu. and the solution sets to the Chi-Com flu. It has become the most divisive element in all of American society, all the way into families, into church groups. And within Christianity, it's become extremely difficult because there are so many woke evangelical pastors. I don't even like the word woke. I would say that they're uh, definitely subjects of the government is who a lot of these pastors are. Now, they say that they're not, but in effect, because they are not standing up like those pastors and during the Revolution of America in the 1700s, uh, it's a mess. And look, I went and I studied, and I'm not going to get into it in this program, but I went and I restudied again all of the debates over eschatology because you know that I have even mentioned from time to time that I think it's a position that people and pastors are taking based on their end time theology. And in many ways, that's still true. For most of the evangelicals, they don't act because they think things have to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse for Jesus to return and save them off the rooftop. And I'm sorry, then what you do not believe, and I'm going to lay it flat out for you, no matter what your eschatology is, what your end time belief is, if you think or you say, and this is directed at pastors in particular, but all of the Christianity, as you would want to call yourself, is that if you say that Jesus rose from the dead, he ascended into heaven, and he sits at the right hand of the Father, and as he has claimed, all authority is given to him both in heaven and on earth, and that he is the sovereign over the universe, then why don't you preach it? Why don't you teach it? Why don't you live it? Why don't you act it? So, where we are with the red flag and all of that goes back to eschatology in the church, and that you're not doing things or you're submitting to the government, especially around the Chi-Com flu, all these mandates, when there is so much other science. The government, especially under the socialist leadership regime, whether it's in your state or whether it's at the federal level, they are not truthful and are manipulating this to the nth degree. And that, to an extent, was because of the bureaucrats, even during the Trump administration, manipulated it to the nth degree. So if you believe that Christ is absolutely sovereign over everything, then you need to act in that sovereignty. You need to be living in his sovereignty, and you need to be taking and owning the culture. You need to be owning your job. You need to be owning your company. You need to be owning the political realm. You need to be owning the educational realm. But no, for so many who have been waiting to be rescued off the rooftops, instead, you've given it over to the enemy, and therefore you have denied the sovereignty of Christ resurrected and sitting in heaven. Okay? End of it. Period. Now, with that, that continues to be, in my opinion, the false flag for Christians. If you're not engaged, then you don't believe that Christ is sovereign. So I don't know. I don't know what I can say, especially in the political realm, because if you're not there, then Christ is not sovereign in the universe. I'm going to leave you with that. And then when we come back into the next segment, we're going to talk about state constitutions and raging bulls. You know, Sam Adams understood it about the Constitution. Look in the references. He talks about what happened there when he was governor. Come on back for the second segment, and we'll get into it a whole lot more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists got it right, and I think I forgot to introduce myself in the last segment. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and I am delighted that you are here again this week. In this segment here, right at the beginning, what I usually do is ask you to participate in donating to Liberty Works Radio Network. Well, I'm going to change that up a bit in that I am taking and receiving from people help and funding this program. And with that, I am putting a budget together. And everybody needs to understand that I am totally into transparency on what it takes and responsibility with other people's money. So with that, you need to be clear in understanding that I am putting a budget together. For those that are interested in contributing, I am going to first contribute to here at Liberty Works Radio Network, as I know that I have the financial capacity to do that because of you contributing to Samuel Adams Returns program. It has to work that way. Kath and I were discussing how is it to expand this opportunity, and there was a letter sent out to many of you that shows we can expand to other networks. But our first responsibility is to Liberty Works Radio Network because John Cotamar invited me almost 6 years ago to Liberty Works Radio Network, and he graced me in. Okay. And that has been a blessing for all these years. And I have promoted Liberty Works Radio Network all this time for you to take and contribute to them. But now, what I'm going to do is ask that we do expand what Sam Adams does, and that you contribute then to us in a way that we can then contribute back to Liberty Works Radio Network. But I can't do that unless I know what I'm going to be able to do on a budgetary basis. So that's what we're doing. We're putting a budget together. We're getting it out to all of those interested, and then we will do what is appropriate in regard to ensuring that, first off, we make a contribution to Liberty Works Radio Network. And then secondly, is that if there's sufficient funding to take the network forward, uh, we will do that. I'm establishing a board of directors for the group, as well as we're going to take and look at in a very strong manner what it means to do all of the correct things. So with that, enough. And now we'll press back into false flags and raging bulls. So we've seen, and we're going to go to the raging bulls probably in the last segment, if at all, because what the raging bulls are is basically people not knowing what to do, or people acting in that emotional way, people not acting in a framework of constitutionalism fundamentally, not acting in the framework of understanding the biblical context of this nation. So then emotion overcomes any sensibility. And that's what we have to have. That's what our founders had very succinctly, was an understanding of good and evil, and that it is our absolute right to stand up against evil and to fight evil, even within our own government. And it's in the structure not only of our Declaration of Independence, but it is also in the structure of just about every state's constitution. Now, two things that I want to toss out on a potential false flag. Now, we do know for a fact that Homeland Security, because you could go to their website, and they fundamentally have said all of those who are against COVID, the vaccine, all of those types of things are basically extremists and domestic, potentially domestic terrorists. So that puts every Christian, everybody against it. And this is what's tearing the churches apart too, you see. But it doesn't matter. If you're a Christian, no matter what, you're a domestic terrorist and you're on that list. But what's critical to understand is that you need to operate within the context of, I will take it all the way back to Beza, in the idea of what he was talking about, what he saw with the Magdeburg Confession, which really came about by Lutheran jurists and theologians who actually drafted that in 1550. And then Beza took and he expounded on that. He brought it together. You have to go back and look at this reference that I'm going to put up for you and what that means and how, again, that Magdeburg Confession is something that every Christian should stand on. Now, let's wrap it back here a little bit and tie it together. I am also going to give you a reference, and it's there in your references, in a short video and comment from the Institute on the Constitution. And it's "You Are Not Alone." And it's interesting to me that a new word that Michael Anthony Perutka uh, came to understand. The term is menticide, menticide, which means murdering of the mind. Now, that's what we have going on in our media, because as we consider all the different things that I've talked to at this point, is that we no longer have people that can think clearly, that can take and have that critical thinking. And to have the critical thinking, you have to have a mind. But if your mind is murdered by education, if it's murdered by politicalization, if it's murdered by bureaucratic decree, then how are you supposed to think? All you're supposed to do is bow down to those that are murdering it, murdering your mind. So when we look at how things are being enslaved, I think I'm going to leave it to you to go listen to the short little video and all of that. And if you want to sign up for the Constitution classes, I have a link that I would ask you to use instead of what's on the video, because if that link gives me a little credit on that you listen to this program and that through it you went ahead and taken a free Constitution class, which is there's classes that I facilitate in areas here in Northeast Ohio. But what you have to understand is what that means is in this menticide. I also came up with another term that I was reading another article, and it is this gentrification. Gentrification. And it's where a lot of the millennials and some of the Gen Zers, it's all about the process of renovating and improving housing or a district so it conforms to middle class taste. The process of making someone or something more refined, polite, or respectable. Well, what's going on with that is that culturally, the socialists have brainwashed so many Gen Zers and all of that. They're against the middle class. So that's part of the war that's going on. So, what does that have to do with your state constitutions? Well, let me take you to this real quick here because we have about 5 or so minutes. So let's go to Indiana. Ohio, I've given you that. All the references, again, are at SamuelAdamsReturns.net for this program. And Indiana, just like Ohio, your Article 1 is your Bill of Rights. It is the Bill of Rights. It goes through a preamble and then right into the Bill of Rights. And that the great and essential principles of liberty and free government may be recognized and unalterably established. They declare that all men are born equally free and independent and have certain natural, inherent, and unalienable rights, among which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, and acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. And then it goes on to talk about all power is inherent in the people. Okay, Indiana. Let's go on over to Pennsylvania real quick. Pennsylvania, the first article in Pennsylvania, it's a Commonwealth Declaration of Rights. What is your Declaration of Rights? Inherent rights of mankind, political power, religious freedom, religion, elections, trial by jury. These are all the different sections in here and what those rights are. And you need to understand your rights. All men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent indefensible rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty and acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness. Folks, this is where you anchor yourselves and you anchor and go and make sure, and I'm going to say this one over and over again so you don't become a raging bull. You use this at the meetings and tell all of the bureaucrats and elected you swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of your state, whatever it is, and by taking and swearing that oath, you are beholden and mandated to take and look at this Article 1 in those states where it's Article 1. Now, let's look at, where did I have Kentucky? Let's see, I'm not sure. Let's go to West Virginia real quick. So West Virginia, you kind of goofed up because your Article 1 kind of states your relationship to the government of the United States. And I got to tell you, you guys kind of put a hook in your shoulder blades and, or a big hook in your mouth so that you're on the leader as a fish being drug all the way around. But when you take and you look at your Article 3 is your Bill of Rights for West Virginia. And West Virginia's Article 3 starts out pretty much the same way. All men are by nature. Okay, by nature, and nature's God is where we look at it from the Declaration of Independence. Equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and of pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Yep. And then it goes on to say all power is vested in the people, derived from the people, invested in the people. So, people, what is it that you need to do not to be a raging bull and going stomping off and biting onto whatever red flag shows up? The sensibility, the rational thinking, the critical thinking. And this means take this into your churches. Have your pastors and have your deacons or whatever the structure is inside your church read and understand your state constitution. Because as humans acting on this earth under the sovereignty of God, they are responsible to that constitution, not the laws of men. So, Sam Adams, we're going to talk about when we get into the third segment, is one of the key references in the Sam Adams wisdom that you see in the newsletter, and that's there at samueladamsreturns.net on the program. He kind of addresses, if a law is bad, you need to take and redress that law, especially anyone that has sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. So come on back in the next segment, as we finish up with not being a bull. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third and last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did. They got it right for all the principles that concern us, and they were predictive. Absolutely predictive in so many different ways. Oh, but before I continue, this is Tom Navolis, your host, and definitely delighted that you are here with me again. And just to continue with that thought about the anti federalists and what they predicted that if you allowed it, that the federal government would subsume the states. And that's what's been happening over the last almost 100 years, is that the states forgot what a structure of a republic really is and kept giving in to and taking from the federal government, and allowed the federal government to put things and programs in place that actually stole not just your money, but your liberties, and put in so many different hooks that you allowed the violation of your own state constitutions. So, as I opened in the very first segment, don't buy off on the red flags. Use your heads, know your Constitution, hold those accountable to that. Now, while we're on the break, I did take the time to find the Kentucky Constitution. I had it right in front of me the whole time, but I have so many different things opened up here on the desktop that it took me a moment to readjust for it. But one of the things that I really appreciate about the um, Kentucky Constitution is, and I want you to listen clearly, because your governor in Kentucky is not following the intent of your Constitution. Remember, you got a Democrat governor, and although he says he's a Christian, he falls into everything that I talked about in the first segment on, manipulative Christianity in so many different ways, using Christianity. I didn't say all that, but I'm saying it now. Using Christianity as a cover for violating truth, biblical truth, as well as constitutional truth. So here you go, Kentucky, and take this in general, all you other folks, just in the preamble. We, the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, grateful to Almighty God for the civil, political, and religious liberties we enjoy, and invoking the continuance of these blessings, do ordain and establish this Constitution. That alone should rock the socks of every person in Kentucky to act and utilize this tool to bring anyone that has sworn an oath to uphold this Constitution back to it. Okay? Because the oath of offices is established on this preamble. That okay? You got to get that solid. Everybody, look at your own state's constitution. Look at your preamble. And the first thing in Kentucky, as it is in Ohio and Indiana, that's the Bill of Rights. That the great and essential principles of the liberty and free government may be recognized and established. We declare that, Section 1, rights of life, liberty, worship, pursuit of safety and happiness, free speech, acquiring and protecting property, peaceable assembly, redress of grievances, bearing arms. All men are, by nature, free and equal, and have certain inherent and inalienable rights, among which may be reckoned. First, the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties. Second, the right of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of their conscience. Third, the right of seeking and pursuing their safety and happiness. That's you. And that's in most of these constitutions. Ohio is the same. Look at them clearly in your Bill of Rights. You have the right and the responsibility of seeking and pursuing your own safety and happiness. It's not the government. It's not some CDC. It's not some medical director. You need to think for yourself. Fourth, the right of freely communicating their thoughts and opinions. What did I just say? Freely communicate. Your right to think and communicate. Fifth, the right of acquiring and protecting property. The right of assembling together in a peaceable manner. And if you're going to assemble, don't be raging bulls. Peaceable manner for the common good, and of applying those invested with the power of government for redress of grievances or other proper purposes by petition, address, or remonstrance. Seventh, the right to bear arms in defense of themselves, of the state, subject to the power of the General Assembly to enact laws to prevent persons from carrying concealed weapons. And then it goes on talking about absolute arbitrary power, absolute and arbitrary power over the lives, liberty, and property of freemen exists nowhere in a republic, not even in the largest majority. That's huge because your governor in Kentucky, he took and executed absolute and arbitrary power. That's throughout all of the various states when you go and you consider your articles of bills of rights in your state constitutions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is incumbent. I don't know how I'm going to take and press this home sufficiently in that, once again, starting at the beginning of the program, you need to go to the references and look at, listen to, or read the post that Doug Wilson put up in respect to the false flags. And the false flags, trust me, they're being worked. And it could be all over the map. You know what? That article that I put up there goes right or left, depending on who's the conspiracy theorist. But we know that the communists in power right now, and specifically the communists, all of the bureaucrats that have been instantiated in every level of government, all the bureaucratic people, they don't care about your constitutional rights. And this follow the science stuff, there's the link for what I talked about on the false science is there in the notes. Go to that and review that program in and of itself. But the caution that Pastor Wilson puts out is don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. And how do you not buy into it is to know, to be a critical thinker, to understand your state constitution. And in understanding that, once again, take that thing. What I do is I print off the Bill of Rights for the state of Ohio. I take it everywhere I go. And if somebody starts saying, well, you have to wear a mask, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, and I said, no, I don't. Here it is. This is the state constitution. This gives me the authority to be the free agent within the context of this state. This gives me my secured rights. And it also allows me that if the law is bad, if the law is wrong, is to then challenge it with the administrators of that, the bureaucrats, as well as the political people that we elect. And that comes to the other side of it. You need to work hard at vetting every person that is running for any elected office, school board, dog catcher, the cesspool agent, it doesn't matter. Anybody that's being elected, you need to query them intently on your state constitution. Every one of them are going to stand up when they win their office. They're going to raise their hand, and they're either going to take a what? They're either going to affirm that they're going to support that, or they're going to make an oath that they will uphold and support the Constitution. So then you look them eyeball to eyeball and go, you know what? You're an oath breaker. You're a violator of the public trust. And that includes the bureaucrats. This whole thing on the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, that means you are responsible to go to the bureaucrats, and especially the elected who appoint the bureaucrats, and tell the elected that their bureaucrats are violating their oath to what? Hey, here it is. Here's Article 1 in the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, other constitutions. Article 1 is the Bill of Rights. Everything else in the Constitution is only workable and allowable when you take and you understand that Bill of Rights. And then any laws, any bureaucratic decrees must conform to those fundamental principles. If they're not proper law. And they need to be redressed. They need to be redone. Remember, people, that the legislatures act many, many times in a knee-jerk fashion. Something hits that crazy bone in the knee and boom, there it goes. It kicks out something. But the unintended consequences of when it kicks out, where that foot actually makes a connection to, you can draw the conclusive picture for yourself where it may land, you know, uh, on an anatomy, if you will. I'll leave that up to you to make that type of decision. But what I don't want you to be is the raging bull. I want you to take and be able to operate, and what we should be doing is operating within the context of our constitutions. We need to operate in those, as Kentucky said, based on the fact that this is something given to us within the orders of men, but we're hoping that God blesses us through it all. We need to understand, especially for you that call yourself Christians, that you need to understand this. Don't be sitting up on a rooftop waiting for Jesus to take and rapture you off of it, because as I said in the first segment, then what you're doing is you are not acknowledging the full authority of Christ in heaven and on earth, because it's the same. And what that means is that you're responsible to be out there and making sure that the whole gospel is brought into action. Salvation's up to the Holy Spirit, okay? Jesus said that we're supposed to make disciples. That's a whole lot different than going out and doing salvation. That's the work of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. It's the work of the cross and the resurrection, not the work of Joe Schmuckatelli, all right? But you are to be the church, active and visible here on earth. The body of Christ means you need to act. Sam Adams understood that. The preachers during the time of the revolution, maybe you need to go read them and understand them. Yeah, they had differences in eschatology, but they all came together in the action of what it meant to live the gospel all the way into the physical realm. come on back when Sam Adams returns next week and we really get some more engagement going on They Got It Right.